January 29th, 1945, 2:47 p.m., Holtzheim, Belgium. Clay Holt follows a short, compact first sergeant along the lee side of a farmhouse, keeping his shoulders hunched against the wind. The corner opens like a trap, and Clay stops because the world in front of him is wrong. Dozens of German soldiers stand in the snow with rifles in their hands, and 4 Americans kneel with their hands behind their heads. The result is instant arithmetic. 1 corner, 1 mistake, 90 barrels, and the cost is that Clay's lungs forget how to work for a beat too long. Clay's fingers tighten on the sling of his carbine, but the movement only makes the leather creak. A German officer steps forward and drives the muzzle of a submachine gun into the first sergeant's stomach, shouting words Clay cannot pass from this distance. The result is a command that needs no translation, and the cost is that Clay realizes he is standing in the open with a weapon that suddenly feels like a promise he cannot keep. The first sergeant, Leonard, does not raise his hands. Funk looks from the kneeling guards to the armed Germans to the gun pressed into him, and then he starts laughing. The result is a sound that does not belong to a battlefield, and the cost is that Clay's mind jerks to the rule that has been burning in him since December. Do not trust surrender, because surrender can be a doorway to a field of corpses. That rule was never printed on an army card. It arrived in fragments, the way everything arrives in the Ardennes, through breath, through mud, through men who looked like they had aged 10 years in 10 miles. It became a fact before it became official, and the result is that Clay's body reacts before his thoughts can line up. The cost is that whatever he does in the next minute will carry the shadow of something that happened miles away at a place called Malmedy. December 18th, 1944, 4:10 a.m., the Ardennes forest. Clay sits in a shallow foxhole with a radio set cradled between his knees, the dials stiff from cold, and his fingertips numb inside damp gloves. He keeps turning the tuning knob because static is still better than silence, and the result is a few broken syllables, units, roads, Germans, armor, without a full sentence to hold on to. The cost is that uncertainty multiplies fear, and fear in this weather turns into mistakes. Clay is supposed to be a node, keep the set alive, keep a log, keep orders moving. He used to repair radios for a living, now he repairs them so men can keep killing and not be killed. The result is a job that never ends, and the cost is that his hands are always one failure away from uselessness. When the set coughs and dies, Clay strips his gloves and uses bare fingers because leather cannot feel tiny screws. The result is that he can tighten a loose connection and coax the radio back to life. The cost is that his fingertips burn and then go numb, and he has to work by sight instead of sensation, knowing that one dropped screw will vanish into snow like it never existed. The cold is not scenery. It pries the oil out of weapons, makes metal bite skin, and turns wet cloth into boards. Clay watches a man try to work a bolt that will not cycle, and the result is a rifle that becomes a club at the worst moment. The cost is that the enemy does not have to be clever when nature is already breaking you. Clay keeps a second notebook for the medic because paper is lighter than carrying bodies. He writes names, symptoms, who can still walk, who cannot. The result is a crude map of a company's health. The cost is that the map changes faster than he can update it, and the missing ink always means a man who will not come back. Just before dawn, a cluster of exhausted soldiers stumbles past the C Company line, their coats rimmed with ice and their eyes too wide. Clay steps out of his hole to ask where they came from, and the result is a burst of contradictory answers. Tanks, no tanks, SS, regulars, prisoners taken, prisoners shot. The cost is that Clay cannot tell which words are fear-talking and which words are truth, and he cannot afford to guess wrong. The captain has no time for argument. Clay watches officers reassign cooks to carry ammunition and clerks to dig, and the result is a company reshaped into whatever shape the day demands. The cost is that reshaping takes time, and time is the one thing this forest does not grant. By mid-morning, the radio delivers only scraps, but the trenches deliver more. A runner from another unit collapses near the command post and says between breaths that men who surrendered were shot in a field near Malmedy. The result is a sentence that lands like artillery, and the cost is that every soldier who hears it now has to decide whether it is a lie that will get them killed or a truth that will. Clay does what his position demands. He asks for names, dates, and units, and he writes down what he gets. The result is ink on paper that feels too thin to carry a horror. The cost is that even thin ink can ignite because everyone is hungry for something firm in a place where nothing holds. An hour later, the rumor becomes a person. A jeep arrives at the edge of the position and two men half-drag a third out of the back seat, his face grey with cold and shock. Clay moves toward him because the radio is quiet and the man looks like an emergency, and the result is that Clay becomes one of the first listeners. The cost is that listening will make him responsible for what the story does to the unit. The survivor says he was with the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion. He says they surrendered because there were tanks and no other option. The result is a context that sounds ordinary, and the cost is that ordinary contexts are exactly where trust lives. He describes the surrender in procedural terms: weapons dropped, hands up, men herded into a field. Clay writes those words because they are the hinge. The result should be captivity. The cost is that the next words snap the hinge in half. The survivor says the shooting started without warning. He does not polish it into drama. He delivers it in the flat voice of a man who is still watching the scene in his head. The result is that the men around him go still, as if silence could keep the story from being real. The cost is that stillness outside this shelter is lethal, and even inside it, stillness does not stop what the story is doing. He talks about men falling and then being finished off at close range. He says he heard pistols after the machine guns, and he says the boots came closer. The result is that the story stops being rumor in Clay's mind. The cost is that belief arrives with a price. Once Clay believes, he cannot unknow it. He admits he lived by playing dead. He lay in the snow while voices laughed and boots walked past, and he waited for darkness to crawl away. The result is a survival method so degrading it feels like an injury. The cost is that Clay imagines himself with his hands raised and understands how little control a surrender can buy if the enemy has decided you are not human. Funk is there when the story ends. Clay sees the first sergeant's face as he asks for time, place, numbers, what insignia they wore, whether there were armored vehicles, whether anyone spoke English. The result is a soldier trying to turn horror into data. The cost is that data cannot reduce the horror, it only makes it more usable. The captain listens with his jaw clenched and then sends the survivor to the medic and sends everyone else back to their posts. The result is motion restored. The cost is that motion does not restore trust, it only spreads the story faster, carried by men who are already primed to believe the worst. Clay takes his notes to the command post and compresses the account into 3 hard points for the captain and Funk. Surrendered in a field, fired on without warning, survivors escaped by playing dead and crawling away at night. The result is a clean frame that can travel without mutating too much. The cost is that men who are not included assume he is hiding something, and suspicion is a solvent in a unit. Within an hour, Clay hears the story again from a different mouth, and it already has extra teeth. Someone says the Germans laughed while they shot. Someone says there were more than 100 bodies. The result is a horror that grows as it spreads. The cost is that Clay's attempt to keep facts intact makes him sound to some men like he is defending the enemy. The fire grows anyway. Men whisper SS as if it is weather and whisper no prisoners as if it is an order. The result is a phrase that fits in a mouth and slides into every gap where fear used to be. The cost is that the phrase has no guardrails and it attaches itself to every German face by default. A private slams his fist into a crate near the ammunition stack and says he will never raise his hands again. The result is a vow that feels like strength. The cost is that vows demand payment later, when the body is cornered and the mind is screaming for any exit. The captain tries to cool the pot, insisting prisoners will be treated by the book unless ordered otherwise. The result is an official line. The cost is that the line sounds thin against the weight of the survivors shaking hands and the private's vow. Funk does not give a speech. He tells Clay quietly that men should not count on surrender to save them, and they should not count on mercy to arrive on time. The result is pragmatic guidance. The cost is that pragmatism, in this context, cuts away alternatives that used to exist. By nightfall, Clay sees the rumor reshaping behavior. Sentries aim sooner. Patrols return with empty hands and harder eyes. The result is vigilance. The cost is that vigilance under frost and fatigue slides toward panic with a single snapped branch. And panic does not ask who deserves to live. January 4th, 1945, 6:32 p.m. The Ardennes forest. Clay follows a patrol into the trees because the captain wants a written report and because Clay wants to see what the new rule looks like when it meets a real enemy. The result is that a man who should be behind a desk is stepping over frozen roots with a rifle that feels heavier than it did yesterday. The cost is that if he goes down, the patrol will not stop to argue about whether he belonged here. The patrol's task is narrow: check a suspected approach route and confirm whether German scouts have been probing the flank. Clay carries spare batteries and a notebook wrapped in oilcloth. The result is that he is still trying to do his job. The cost is that his job now competes with keeping his fingers from becoming dead weight. They find fresh boot prints cutting across their line and a cigarette butt crushed into the snow. The result is proof of recent presence. The cost is that how many is still a guess, and guesses are how ambushes start. The first shot comes from the Germans, a rifle crack that hits bark near a corporal's head. The result is instant return fire and men dropping into the snow. The cost is that snow is shallow cover and bullets do not respect it. Clay does not see the enemy at first. He hears the rhythm of their fire, controlled bursts, quick shifts, and the result is the sense of professionals working a problem. The cost is that professionalism, after Malmedy, carries a special fear. Professionals can kill you and then kill you again after you stop resisting. The patrol leader shouts men into better angles. Clay forces himself to watch and catches movement. White smocks blending with the ground, shapes slipping between trunks. The result is an enemy that looks like winter itself. The cost is that a faceless enemy is easier to turn into the thing you already hate. A grenade goes off, muffled by snow, and the shockwave buys a few seconds. The result is a momentary break in the German line. The cost is that the patrol burns one of its few explosives, and scarcity always comes due. Americans concentrate fire on likely exits, and German movement slows. The result is advantage. The cost is tunnel vision. Every man is looking where he expects the enemy to be, not where the enemy could appear. Then Clay sees two figures step out with their hands raised. The gesture is universal, and it lasts only a second, but it changes the shape of the moment. The result is a window that should lead to prisoners and answers. The cost is that Malmedy sits in every head, and windows in this war have been used as bait. The patrol leader hesitates and does not order cease fire. Clay shouts over the noise, "Cover them, disarm them, move them fast," because he knows what the book demands when it still matters. The result is that one rifle barrel dips for an instant. The cost is immediate. A burst from the trees catches a private in the leg as he shifts, and blood darkens snow in a fast-spreading stain. The shot erases the pause. Americans fire again, harder, and the raised hands vanish behind the trees. The result is a choice made without ceremony. The cost is that once the choice is made, it cannot be argued into innocence, only into necessity. The firefight ends with silence that feels like a held breath. The patrol moves forward cautiously and finds bodies, not prisoners. The result is a confirmed kill zone. The cost is that confirmed kills do not answer questions, and unanswered questions are how the enemy stays one step ahead. Clay looks for identifying evidence because he needs to know what they just did. He finds a document pouch on one corpse and a strip of cloth that suggests a unit, but not enough to swear to. The result is inconclusive proof that can still be used as justification. The cost is that inconclusive proof is exactly what rumor needs to grow into certainty. They drag their wounded man back. The medic clamps a bandage and fights to keep him from slipping into shock. The result is a narrow survival margin. The cost is that the medic's supplies thin and the next casualty will have less. Back at the line, men ask Clay if the Germans tried to surrender. Clay answers with facts because facts are his defense against emotion. The result is that the facts become fuel anyway. The cost is that a story told in facts can still harden into a rule, and rules are easier to follow than doubts. Clay writes the report by candlestub, describing hands raised and fire continued, choosing language that avoids accusation because accusation would ignite another fight inside the unit. The result is a document that can be filed. The cost is that the filing does not ease the weight in his chest because he knows the difference between what happened and what words can safely say. In the days that follow, Clay watches preparation shift. Patrols carry fewer restraints and more extra magazines. The result is readiness for killing rather than processing. The cost is that killing solves immediate danger but starves the unit of intelligence that could prevent a larger danger. Funk uses the patrol's outcome without sermon. He tells reassigned clerks and supply men that if they end up surrounded, their best chance is the rifle in their hands and the man next to them, not a promise from the enemy. The result is that frightened men absorb a harsh truth in practical terms. The cost is thinner sleep and quicker trigger fingers. Clay tries to keep the new rule from becoming pure vengeance by translating it into procedure. He writes 3 short rules and pins them inside the shelter where the new men eat. Accept surrender only with multiple rifles covering and enemy weapons already away. Move prisoners immediately from weapon piles. Never assign a guard detail too small to survive surprise. The result is minimal structure against chaos. The cost is that the rules also announce plainly how much the old assumptions have died. January 29th, 1945, 9:10 a.m., outside Holtzheim, Belgium. Clay marches with C Company through deep snow because orders do not soften for weather and because the company is under strength and needs every body that can carry a weapon. The result is a line of men moving like figures carved from ice. The cost is that the march drains them before the fight even begins, and drained men make the kind of mistakes that start chain reactions. Funk walks at the front, setting a pace that forces others to match him. Clay notes the mix, veteran paratroopers alongside men whose hands still look like office hands. And the result is a makeshift assault force built from necessity. The cost is that necessity is not training, and the lack will show itself the first time bullets cut close. The village appears as low silhouettes behind blown snow. Inside, the fight is a chain of small fights stitched together by exhaustion. Clay follows the moving center of gravity, carrying messages and trying to keep his writing hand steady. The result is that he sees more than he wants to see. The cost is that seeing is not neutral. Each room cleared leaves residue in the throat. Prisoners begin to accumulate as Germans give up in clusters. Clay watches rifles stack in a pile because it is the fastest way to make surrendered men harmless. The result is a temporary sense of order. The cost is that every piled weapon is also a future problem if control slips, and Clay hears his own posted rules in his head like a warning bell. By early afternoon, the company has dozens of prisoners and more resistance to clear. Funk assigns 4 men to guard the captives at a farmhouse yard because that is all he can spare. The result is a thin line of security. The cost is that thin lines break under pressure, and Clay knows, because he wrote it down, that surprise preys on thin lines first. Clay wants to stay and reinforce the guard detail, but Funk pushes him back toward the remaining fight. The result is that Clay returns to moving through the village, sending brief status notes and trying to keep the rear from unraveling. The cost is that distance severs oversight, and oversight is what keeps small vulnerabilities from becoming disasters. When firing slackens near the center of town, Funk says he's going to check on the prisoners. Clay follows because Funk is the axis around which the day is turning, and because Clay's instincts, sharpened by Malmedy and by the patrol, have made him sensitive to any weak guard line. The result is two men moving toward the farmhouse with the sense that something unattended becomes something dangerous. The cost is that the sense arrives too late to prevent what they are about to see. They approach along a wall. Clay sees tracks near the yard that do not match the earlier flow of prisoners, and the result is a clue that raises his pulse without offering a solution. The cost is that he has no time to warn anyone before the corner opens. The guards are on their knees, disarmed, and the prisoners are not prisoners anymore. Germans hold rifles taken from the pile and shift into firing positions with practiced speed. The result is a reversal so complete it feels like a trick. The cost is that this trick is aimed at a company scattered across a village, a company that will be slaughtered from behind if the yard stays in enemy hands. Clay's mind tries to build the missing seconds. How a patrol could slip in, how 4 guards could be overwhelmed, how the weapon pile could be opened. But he cannot, because he did not see it happen. He can only read what exists now. Machine guns being positioned, men taking cover, the posture of an ambush being assembled. The result is clarity about intent. The cost is that the intent, if completed, will kill Americans who are still clearing houses and believe the rear is safe. The German officer steps forward and jabs an MP-40 into Funk's gut, shouting. Clay recognizes the structure from the survivor's story. A man told to comply at gunpoint, a moment where obedience is assumed. The result is a collision between past rumor and present fact. The cost is that Clay cannot tell whether these Germans are SS, and after Malmedy, he no longer trusts that the distinction will save anyone. Funk laughs. Clay's first reaction is rage, because laughter sounds like surrender disguised as madness. The result is that Clay almost moves wrong, toward Funk, instead of toward the weapon pile and the kneeling guards. The cost is that a wrong move here draws fire and ends the story before it can change. The laughter continues, louder, and the German officer's certainty cracks into confusion. The result is a seam in the enemy's control. The cost is that a seam is useless unless someone tears it wider, and tearing requires exposure. Funk reaches up as if to comply. The officer relaxes a fraction, watching like a man collecting a trophy. The result is a fraction of time bought with absurdity. The cost is that the fraction will be paid back in blood if it fails. Funk moves with violent speed. The Thompson comes down and the first burst kills the officer at point-blank range. The result is an eruption that turns command into chaos. The cost is immediate return fire. Rounds crack close enough to make Clay's ear ring, and the air taste like metal. Clay dives toward the weapon pile because weapons are leverage, and kneeling men cannot fight without something to hold. The result is that his gloves hit cold stocks slick with snow. The cost is that he is in the open, with no cover except speed, and speed is not armor. He shoves a rifle to the nearest kneeling guard. The guard grabs it and fires, wild at first, then steadier. The result is that a captive becomes a shooter again. The cost is that wild shots invite wild answers, and the enemy has plenty of answers. Clay kicks another rifle toward the second guard and scrambles low as the yard becomes a crossfire that did not exist 10 seconds ago. The result is that Germans are forced to react to multiple angles instead of one mad sergeant. The cost is scraped knees and pain he cannot afford to feel. Funk reloads with muscle memory and keeps firing. Clay sees Germans fall and sees brass casings steam against snow. The result is a battlefield reduced to mechanics. Fire, movement, collapse. The cost is that mechanics erase nuance, and nuance is where mercy used to live. A soldier beside Clay jerks and drops without a sound. The result is a reminder that courage does not make you bulletproof. The cost is that the dead man looks more like a clerk than a paratrooper, and Clay understands how thin the line was between roles today. Clay fires at a German moving toward the pile, not out of hatred, but because letting the man reach cover would extend the fight long enough for the ambush to reform. The result is that the German goes down and stops moving. The cost is that the shot lodges in Clay's memory in a way paperwork never could. The fight compresses into less than a minute and time becomes unreliable. Clay hears Funk shouting for Americans to seize enemy weapons and hears Germans shouting back in words he cannot read. The result is confusion layered on violence. The cost is that confusion kills as efficiently as any plan, and it kills without caring who started it. When the shooting thins, hands rise again, this time not as a trick, but as a last reflex. The result is surrender returning in a broken form. The cost is that Clay cannot feel relief cleanly, because Malmedy taught him what raised hands can precede, and the patrol taught him what hesitation can cost. Clay forces himself back into procedure, because procedure is the only barrier between this yard and a second field. He kicks weapons away, strips magazines, and herds the surrendered men into a tighter knot under multiple rifles. The result is a fragile return to order. The cost is that order here is paper over an open wound, and everyone can feel how easily it could tear. After the immediate danger is contained, Clay sees Funk standing with smoke curling from the Thompson. The result is that Funk is alive in a place where math said he should not be. The cost is written in the dead and wounded around them, including men Clay knows by face, if not by name. That night, Clay writes the after-action summary with stiff fingers. He lists numbers because numbers are what the army accepts. Prisoners captured, guards assigned, weapons piled, enemy dead, American casualties. The result is a report that can be filed. The cost is that the report cannot hold the sound of Funk's laughter, or the way the German officer's certainty shattered when laughter met it. Clay adds one private line he knows will never be quoted. He writes that the worst thing in the Ardennes was not the cold, but learning how fast rules collapse when men believe surrender means death. The result is a personal record hidden inside an official document. The cost is that even a hidden record can accuse its author later. When war ends, and people ask what men did when the old rules stopped working. Outside, wind drags snow across the village as if trying to erase footprints. The result is the illusion of clean slate. The cost is that memory does not behave like weather, and what Clay heard in December and did in January will not melt when spring comes.